Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
What's good? GSMC Football Podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It is the dynamic duo once again, Brice and Ethan. I'm Ethan. Brice is on the other line. We're back, and there has been some fantastic news if you are a fan of, if you are, a War Eagle, if you are a fan of the Auburn Tigers, if you are a fan of the Carolina Panthers due to one player alone. Or maybe you just like people getting a second chance or getting another start somewhere fresh. Cameron Newton, number one, the guy who works out the gospel music and is honestly one of the more charismatic football players we've seen in like the last couple of years. I always see, like, unless he's like really doing the sideline thing where he puts the towel over his head and is not feeling what's going on the field, or he just threw a pick or something. Usually he's smiling, having a good time, a lot of confidence, a lot of charisma. Cameron Newton has found a new team, and it's the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots, Brice. Bill Belichick. New England. They've done it again.
Yeah, definitely, man. They always make one of these moves every offseason. Or they just get a quality player for cheap or buy some low draft pick. I guess Cam's the next person in that line of players that they've gotten without having to give up too much.
Okay, so I have a few things here. One, to quote a user I saw on Reddit, don't remember the name. Sorry to that guy, but he was one of the top comments anyway. You'll probably find it. Where he quoted Breaking Bad. He quoted Aaron Paul character's Jesse saying, "You can't keep getting away with this. They can't keep getting away with this. We can't keep letting the Patriots woo us into thinking they're going to suck and it's going to be bad just for Bill Belichick and the gang to be like, psych, we're going back 11-5. Now, I'm not saying that they are, but how foolish was us to think that they were going to roll with Stidham this whole time? A guy who was a 2-year fourth round guy. Jared Stidham. How foolish are we?
I mean, by technical terms, we cannot sit here and just assume Cam gets the job. There's going to be competition, but obviously there may be a preference by everybody there. Because I'm sure Belichick does still want to see what Stidham can do just in case he has a gem in the rough. You can't just rule him out now. And also, you got to think about, we have to see how healthy Cam is as well. Because we got to see if he's going to be the Cam of old or is he going to be the Cam of the last couple of years. So there's a lot of varying factors that we still have to see. And with, like I said, with everything going on in the nation and in the COVID, we'll have to see how it affects that quarterback competition when it gets to that point.
I'm of the mindset of believing this. One, I'm sure that due to how people handled COVID-19 recently, with things getting a little bit looser, the NFL started doing evals on people, so doing checks on people and seeing if they were able to perform. So they were doing conditioning checks, they were doing physicals. I'm sure Cam got a physical, and he was in New England at one point in time and got it checked out, because there's just no way they would have signed off on this deal, even though it's not, a lucrative deal without incentives. So Cam has a lot of incentives. I believe, like, if he hits every incentive, it's like $7 million over the year. So, but there's a lot of stipulations tied to that $7 million. But Cam, I'm assuming he would have picked up Cam. Excuse me. He wouldn't have picked up Cam if he didn't already have the physical done.
Well, yeah. Well, they said that actually Cam passed the physical back in March. So I'm assuming if that's the case, you would feel confident he would pass probably the physical they put him through. Because I know that was one of the things they reported. So I guess in terms of all the medical, he's checking out. So as far as we know, Cam's good to go. He's ready to go. He's ready to play. And he's ready to get into the playbook. Because, this is going to be a little different situation than Cam's used to. He's coming into the Patriot way. He has to get used to the Patriot way. They have probably, as people consider, the most complicated offensive playbook in all of the NFL. So he has to learn that. Stidham already has the heads up on that. So there's some things Cam has to overcome while making that journey to maybe potentially being the starting quarterback of the New England Patriots this year. And listen, it's all great that Cam has a job, and I'm happy for him. But we have to look at this too. New England's offense as a whole still isn't that good. So we'll have to see what he does with the weapons in New England, even though he made the most of what he did in Carolina as well. Because Carolina never had the greatest group of weapons either. So we'll have to see really how it, I guess, comes together. Like I said, like you said earlier, before we started, they're going to try to have the season on time. They're trying to do everything on time. Goodell said training camp's going to start on time. So if that's still the case, I guess we'll have to see how the progression of Cam and camp and his chemistry with everybody and how he gets used to the way Belichick works and how New England works, how it all comes together.
I think here's the deal, right? With Cam, the Patriots thing, all this coming together in one fatal swoop. This was going to be the year that we say, okay, Belichick gets his 1 year off. Essentially, he has all the excuses this year to not be successful, but that's not how Belichick ever has been. He's always been somebody who doesn't tank. Like, Belichick has never tanked since he's been the head coach there. Like, when Tom Brady tore his ACL or he had his knee injury, he didn't tank then either. I mean, they had a bad year, but of course you're going to have a bad year because you don't expect your quarterback to go down. But the year afterwards, of course, that was the Matt Castle year, I think. They went like 11-5. It's in his DNA not to tank. So the idea of them having a bad year is one thing, right? Bad is relative to what you were before, but I don't think he was planning to have any sort of tank year. Like, he may have had a year not to his standards because of the talent around him. Like, let's keep in mind they lost some key players in the defense a little bit. Kyle Van Noy is not there. And although we thought their defense early parts of the season last year was going to be record-setting, but a lot of the numbers and the competition they played against, it mellowed out at a certain point. So their defense still can be serviceable, but it's not like this world-stopper, gang-buster defense. As you could see, it wasn't enough to stop Derrick Henry and the Titans. So what's the next step? Because you can't just win this game with defense alone. We saw that plenty of times in the past 2 years via the Bears, via the Jaguars. Defense, you have to have some sort of scoring, threshold to get there and to be successful. So bringing Cam only makes sense. And I think that he was just like Belichick was waiting to see what would happen because really there was no other place where the position was really vacant or up for grabs. Now, we assume that the Patriots was not an up for grabs position as far as quarterback because they just seem to really be saying, yeah, Stidham, we're going to ride with Stidham. They didn't get anybody in the draft. They said Stidham is our guy for now. And, of course, he could still be their guy for the future if they think he's that talented, but he may not be ready. Like, we only saw he threw, a couple passes and a few touchdowns last year? Like, he didn't do a whole lot last year to prove that he's the Tom Brady successor. And I think Cam rejuvenated and we don't know what his style of play will look like in a Patriots offense, right? We've only seen him in an offense that was catered to him to a fault, but also it wasn't, it wasn't as complex. It didn't get super creative at times, and also he didn't have the greatest talent around him. But I don't think it's crazy to think that, Ron Rivera, being a defensive-minded coach, didn't really have the mindset of how to utilize all the positions around them to Cam's strengths and to the team's strength offensively, besides, running the football or throwing a flat route to Christian McCaffrey or do whatever, do the wheel route. Outside of that, we didn't really see much. It was still the same old, Cam was doing a whole lot. Like, we got to remind ourselves that about a year ago, Cam Newton led that team to like 11-5 or was it 12-4? And yeah, they got bounced out in the playoffs, but Cam's a good player. Like, I think we're too hard on Cam. Like,
definitely, I agree with that, man. I think we're way too hard on Cam sometimes. I just think since Cam has that flamboyant personality, some people don't like it. So when he struggles, that's just the chance for them to jump on him and say, "Oh, he's not that good. He's not that good." And it's a shame because I think Cam is one of the most underappreciated quarterbacks that we've had this past decade. And for a long time, because people forget Cam brought a revolution to the league. He brought, you could say RG3, but you really could say Cam brought that run pass option. He brought that option offense to the league because it fit his strengths. Because remember, when he came into the league, they had the two running backs, D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. I mean, that was one of the best running attacks in the NFL when he came into the league. And one of the reasons why is because they adjusted the offense to his strengths, and they took advantage of really what the strength of the offense was, because the only wide receiver they had that was reliable at that point was Steve Smith, coming up on the later half of his career. So, Cam has done a lot, and I think, listen, he's had the injuries, and, we even had this discussion on Cam about how do you referee Cam? It's kind of like the same question I had about LeBron in the NBA. How do you referee him? Because he's bigger. He's 6'5". He's just as big as a defensive end linebacker.
But that's foolishness, right? That's doesn't even make any sense, because you can use the same you can't use that sort of argument. Like, people, let's keep in mind, the year after he lost the Super Bowl, I've never seen a guy just get tacked on. Like, literally no calls. Like, it was
especially opening day.
It was the
if you remember that game.
Yes. I remember the game against the Falcons where the dude should have been sued for what he did. Literally slid, and in 3 seconds, Cam is getting depleted on the ground. Like, Cam takes a level of punishment a quarterback never has seen, besides maybe Michael Vick, and that was back on the Eagles when they had no offensive line. Cam has taken a lot of physical punishment, a lot of physical toll on his body, and it makes a lot of sense why for the last 2 years he's been banged up. And he's had full time to recover, I would hope. And if he is fully recovered, I expect that the Patriots would do everything in their power to protect him the best way they could. They can protect Tom Brady, and I would imagine that maybe not as far as pocket awareness mobility, but just plain mobility, period. Cameron Newton is a much more mobile quarterback than Tom Brady is. Maybe not in pocket movement, but in overall just movability. So it will make it easier on people not having to stress that Cam can still bust it out wide if he wants to. I would assume he's only 31. He's very young guy, still in the NFL.
And quarterback years especially.
And people are writing him off like he's done. Like, there's going to be another part of Cam's career right now, or we're going to see it if the season starts, that I think people just didn't expect to see. I think he's one of those guys who understands that, he does have things that he's good at. Like, he can still do the barrel in. He can still do the, the dive for the quarterback sneak. But I just don't think he's at the point of his career where he's going to start doing design quarterback runs still, and it's not being safe. But I can guarantee you that it's going to be safer from a Bill Belichick perspective if he is going to do quarterback runs, because he's going to find a way to make it efficient and usable multiple times, and not just some one-off thing, and to keep his quarterback healthy. And I think the Panthers were in a situation where we got to use Cam's strength to win games all the time. And I don't think the Patriots are going to be in a situation where they need Cam at what he used to be in order to win games because they find other ways to win games.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's honestly, we're obviously going to expand on this topic next segment, but obviously we'll see how it changes maybe the expectations for the team and where the team may finish at the end of the season potentially.
Right. Well, like you said, we're going to lead into our first break of the podcast, and then we're going to come back and talk about how this exactly affects the AFC East. So the Bills, Miami Dolphins, and of course the New York Jets. That will be all coming up. This has been the GSMC, and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, GSMC Football Nation, we are back. GSMC Football Podcast. Me and Brice still here. We're talking about some Cam Scram, some Cameron Newton, and how it affects the now AFC East, as it's a big wrinkle. You wouldn't think so, but honestly, the Patriots have been a bit of an afterthought around everything else in the AFC East. You know, there's new shining faces, there's new faces trying to leave, and there are places with new expectations. And the Patriots are, I guess you can say, they had new expectations to not be as good by most NFL fans. And that may have shifted as well. So, Brice, what is the first thing that you think about the AFC East now, since they have supposedly a former MVP candidate back at the quarterback ranks that Bill Belichick can use to his discretion?
Well, I still believe that it's still Buffalo's division to lose this year, because I still feel like as a roster, they still have the best roster in the AFC East. And I feel like Sean McDermott and their coaching staff is one of the best coaching staffs in the league, as they're one of the best adjustment teams I think that I've seen also. But it definitely makes things more complicated, because a lot of people were saying, oh, New England's going to finish last. They're just going to have a whatever season. Or now if Cam starts the quarterback and he resembles anywhere close to where he used to be, that might not be the case. You know, we still, in a way, it feels like it's hard to be able to say who's going to be the first team, the second team, the third team, and the fourth team in the AFC East. Like, you know, in the AFC North, you're going to think, oh, probably Baltimore first, and then maybe Pitt or Cleveland, and then, you know, Bengals are last. Like, you have certain teams like, okay, they're going to probably be here, they'll probably be here, and then this could be switched. AFC East, you could legitimately make an argument all four teams could be switched, depending on how you feel about each team. And so that's what I think this move of Cam moving to New England has done. It's created okay, now this entire division's up for grabs. We'll see how everybody comes out and plays. I mean, listen, you got, if you rank the quarterbacks that potentially could start, let's say Cam starts, and let's say Tua starts also for Miami. I mean, you have a very young, outside of Cam, because Cam would be the oldest, I believe, in the division. You still have Darnold, who's in his third year, coming in. Josh is also in his third year, and then Tua's in his first. I mean, you got three quarterbacks. You got a veteran guy. You have a veteran head coach in Bill Belichick. Obviously, New England's always going to be the veteran squad. You have three teams hungry to take over the division after being under the Patriot shadow for the last 2 decades. I mean, it just creates a lot of interesting dilemmas and possibilities there, you know? And listen, however you may rank who the best quarterbacks in the division are, could be what the division rank is at the end of the day. Whoever plays the best and injuries and everything like that. So I think it's definitely changed some things, because we will have to see how each team looks at the end of the day. And like I said, with the extra playoff spot that was added this year, I mean, listen, you don't know if maybe a second AFC team can maybe sneak in there as well. That could be a chance for New England to get in there. And imagine if they got back to the playoffs again with Cam Newton as the quarterback. So it would definitely be interesting.
Okay, so I agree on some things. I'm going to expand upon it a bit because I have to look at this division like how the people usually judge coaches. So I think this division is as good as their coaches are, and I mean by that in a competitive sense. So whatever happens in this division is solely because of how each team is coached. Because at this point, I don't think the talent disparity is so lopsided, except for in one team, comparative to the point to where no one has a chance to, really make some noise in the division. So New England, we all know about Bill Belichick. He's the best coach in the division, and he's the most seasoned guy. You don't want to go up against him on any given Sunday because he preps like nobody else, and he always has some sort of plan to stop what's going on for you. So their best option is not going to be your best option on that Sunday all the time. Next has to be McDermott from the Bills, right? I feel like the Bills head coach is a guy who has figured out what to do with his talent. Extremely great defensive-minded coach. Great player personnel. It looks like the players really get behind him and like what he's doing. And, I think he's a bit of a player's coach, but at the same time, he seems like a guy who really is really structured to have it his way. And he wants no mistakes, and he wants, quality football played to be the number one thing. And then you have basically two coaches that are a little bit still unproven. We don't know for sure how things are going to work out, but I'd have to say Miami's head coach, he definitely proved himself a bit last season near the back end when everybody gave up on Miami, thought they were going to be the worst team of all time statistically, and he rattled off some wins that people did not expect, of course, essentially sent New England to a first-round loss because they haven't not been without a first-round bye in a very long time, and because of that, they ran up against a really, really hot Titans team, and they couldn't handle it. So all because of a last game of the season against Miami where they played and outplayed New England, essentially. And then, of course, you have Adam Gase and the Jets. So that's a question mark. I still don't know what they are. They are basically losing their best player they've had in a very long time, slowly but surely. So I don't know what that team is going to do in the division, but I'm one that believes Sam Darnold is still a talented quarterback. He's young still raw. But last year was weird. He got derailed by mono of all things. So, of course, another year of kind of derailment, but everybody's kind of in a weird spot because of COVID-19. So we really don't know where Sam Darnold's ability is right now as a quarterback, but I'd hope he's improved. I hope he's been able to figure some things out. But yeah, so last thing real quick before I let you go. New England's ceiling, no one else's ceiling has risen besides, of course, in the last few months, no one's ceiling has risen. We knew that because Josh Allen got a receiver in, someone who could be a quality number one receiver before the draft via trade from Minnesota. Stephon Diggs is a real guy. And people thought, okay, this makes the Bills a bit more legitimate on offense, makes them a real threat, and potentially make a playoff push, which they already are doing. So this isn't something new. It's not like we're saying they're Super Bowl contenders now, but we know that they're much more legitimate of being somebody who can get in the playoffs and make some noise than they were last year. That is a little bit of growth. I don't think it's a big-time amount of growth, though, compared to where they already were. Miami, they are in... they're trying to, I won't say rebuild, but they're trying to build an identity of who they are now. They just got a new quarterback. They don't have a lot of offensive new weapons, but of course, they still have Preston Williams who was really nice before injury. Of course, we all know about Devontae Parker. We know that they got Matt Breida, but we're not sitting here saying their offense is going to be a scorching machine or anything like that. And we know their defense, they got a few guys from the Cowboys, which is nice, but losing Minkah Fitzpatrick via trade, or they traded him, and that does still take a little bit of a heat. Like, it takes a hit to you. But, and then the Jets, who are, we can't mention this enough, are basically losing out on their best player that they've had in years because he doesn't want to be there. That's going to be a hit to them no matter what happens, even though CJ Mosley should be coming back. And he's a guy who I look as one of the better linebackers, interior defensive linebackers in the league. And then we have the Patriots. So the Patriots literally just boosted their potential window through the roof, because if you think about what you get best from Cam Newton, you get a guy who can lead you to winning success. Cam Newton is a winner. Now, he hasn't won the big game, but a lot of people haven't. So he didn't win it when he had the chance, but that Denver team was really, really, really special defensively. And honestly, if you look back at that season, there's a lot of fluky stuff that people have talked about plenty enough times, but if you look at the stats and you look at who they played and look at what was happening for the Panthers, that Super Bowl run was a little bit weird, and they have not been able to replicate that at all. But throughout his tenure, when he was good, they were 11-5, 12-4. They were winning franchise. They were not irrelevant. They got in the playoffs. They made noises. They had big runs. They won big games. So to sit here and say that, this doesn't change New England's path towards maybe getting to another playoff chance or even making another run at this thing, that would be pretty foolish, especially depending on what Cam you get. And if you get a good Cam, the sky is not, I don't want to say the limit, but if you get good Cam, you're definitely in the run.
Yeah, and I think that's very true, because, like I said, Cam really is a big wild card now, I think, in the division, and he could really dictate how the division goes. Now, games that you would have thought New England would have lost with Jarrett Stidham might now be wins with Cam Newton. So this could actually change teams that they play on the schedule this year. Obviously, we talked about mainly the division, but it could also change what happens with other teams that they play throughout the entire year, because we don't know how many more wins Cam actually will bring to the New England Patriots when the season concludes.
And the thing about that is, we can't look at this as they added an MVP, former MVP. That means that they're automatically going to be in a better place, because you don't know what Bill Belichick has up his sleeve. We don't even know if Cam will start, but it's the assumption that Cam is going to get at least the first looks at being the starter, because he has the pedigree, he has the reps, he knows what it is to start in the NFL locker room, he knows how to conduct himself as a starter. He has the reps to do that, and you don't want to basically, unless Stidham is literally the next Patrick Mahomes sitting underneath, which he hasn't been, and I don't think he is, because we would have heard that by now. Now, we've heard some things about Stidham being able to zip the ball or whatever the case may be, but you can't always trust everything you hear out of camps, because you'll hear that from a lot of different places. So remember all those times with Tim Tebow, you hear like, oh yeah, he's changed his mechanics again for the fourth time. He's throwing the ball great. And then he would get on the Patriots, or he'd get on the Jets, or he'd get wherever, and they would just not play him, or he would get cut literally 2 weeks afterwards. It's just how football gets reported sometimes, or just players in general. But I think this Cam stuff has some real depth to it, and I think it's really smart that the Patriots did this. And I also think that it could be, I feel like this will work out more so for the Patriots in the long term rather than anything else they could have done. Now, of course, they still don't have weapons, because Sony Michel is not a pass catcher extraordinaire. Of course, they still have James White, which is nice. But outside of that, they have Henry, who hopefully he turns into something. He had a wishy-washy first year in New England, but I'm still thinking that they have hope for him. And they have Julian Edelman. That's about it. They don't have anybody else. They have that tight end they drafted this year, who I think he can be a quality guy, but I'm not looking at him to be the focal point of any offense at this point in time. So it's hard to look at any rookie right now, especially with the climate. They haven't been able to get a lot of reps. If they have been, it's because they've been joining up with teammates, former or current in the NFL, getting workouts in without league supervision. But other than that, I just assume that they don't have the reps.
Yeah, definitely. I think this entire New England offense will be a interesting watch to see how they come together. Obviously, you also have some guys trying to bounce back after the year they had last year. And really, honestly, if you think about every offense in the AFC East, is going to be interesting to watch because there's no offense in the AFC East that we believe it's just that offense is that offense. Every offense is trying to prove that they're a good offense, but we don't have a team that we just know is a good offense.
Yeah, and a lot of the good offenses right now are already well established in the AFC. You know, the Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, former or reigning Super Bowl champions. We know that that's about it in the AFC. Like, if we're being real, everybody else is kind of dependent on game situation. Like, the Raiders can score sometimes. Sometimes they're a little bit weird. We don't know what they feel about Derek Carr. The Chargers, new quarterback situation. And from all accounts, I'm not one to believe that they are going to fully lean into this. We're going to start Tyrod Taylor for 3 games and then put in a rookie quarterback. I think it's better to get him in early than it is to just ease him in unless something drastic happens. I just don't see them starting off the bat being great, even though they have the potential because they have a lot of skill players. And then you have places like Cleveland, which I'm not going to get on a rant about again for the 15,000th time. But Cleveland has all the offensive potential in the world, and we don't know what they are, and we won't know until we see them week 1. But, yeah, I think this is a major win for the Patriots, and they have stolen offseason news again. They've done it again without Tom Brady. So, Belichick, you get a star for that one. No one's talking about the Buccaneers right now. All right, so we're going to take another break, and coming out, we are going to talk about Jadaveon Clowney, as he seems to be the last guy out in this whole free agency thing that has that's worth a lick of salt. And there are some teams that he may have some interest in, and teams may be interested in him in general still. This has been GSMC. We'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, GSMC Football Nation. Real quick, if you want to get at us, you can get us up on Twitter at GSMC Football. Brice, what was give me a question that we can ask the viewers here or the listeners that they can respond to us at.
You can ask, do you think that do you believe that now that Cam Newton is on the Patriots, will that make the Patriots a playoff team for this coming season?
Boom. That's
yes
one question. We'll do that. We might even do a poll. In fact, let's do this. I have an idea. Let's do a poll that is about football, but not really about the sport, but about the culture. If you had the option, we're going to give you a few different options for alcoholic beverages, which one is the go-to for your Sunday afternoon watching the 1 o'clock games Eastern Standard Time? If you know what I'm saying. If you are on the West Coast, you probably are just waking up, eating breakfast, watching football. Lucky you. But if you're an East Coast guy, which beer you're cracking open. So we'll put out some options. We'll get that poll going and see what the interactions are. So you can still follow us at GSMC Football. All right. Brice, what do you have for us about the Jadaveon Clowney stuff? I'm sure it is going to make me feel a little bit happy about it.
Well, it really, Jadaveon Clowney was just discussing, some teams that he wouldn't mind playing for, and 2 teams that he mentioned. Obviously, he's been connected to teams like Cleveland and New York and Seattle and Tennessee, but 2 teams that he mentioned that he wouldn't mind playing for, so obviously people will take this as maybe a preference, is that he said he wouldn't mind playing for the Dallas Cowboys or the New Orleans Saints. So obviously, that might raise some eyebrows. I'm sure Cowboy fans, Saints fans start thinking to themselves about, what do we want him here? I mean, do we want to pay him a bunch of money to give us 6 sacks? But we going to stop the run, though. We going to get about at least 15 of those. But, I mean, it just really depends. I mean, obviously, I'm sure Dallas isn't really in position to do it because if they give anybody a big contract that's not Dak Prescott right now, there's going to be some problems. And I'm sure the Saints, y'all have so many players that y'all have tied up under the cap. We don't really know how much money y'all have left to give. So, I mean, that may just be teams that he would like to go to, but realistically, it doesn't seem likely. But I mean, Ethan, so what would you think? Since, obviously being a Saints fan, would you welcome Jadaveon? Would you be like, oh, if we bring him in here, I'm happy? Or would you kind of be like, you know what, I'm just going to stick with what we have and go with that?
Well, I look at it like this. Jadaveon is in a situation where his market isn't really there this year. And I'm sure he's looking to get some money if the season does start. So I would assume that he would sign a deal that gets him at least some money. He can make a prove himself deal. He may do something similar to what Cam did and have a bunch of incentives. But I don't think he would stress the cap thing much because I think that time is over with, right? We're getting close to training camp. I don't think people are about to start forking over $10 million, $12 million for Jadaveon like they would have a few months back when we didn't really know where this thing was leading. So maybe he kind of played the field a little bit too long, and now he's seeing the writing on the wall because Cam really set ablaze to what is the possibility for getting guys around that age group and the type of production that they would get. Now, Jadaveon Clowney is still a productive player, and he's not the guy that we thought we'd get coming out of South Carolina, of course, but he is still a productive guy. He's one of those smaller guys who can, rush and do a little bit of coverage, but he's not some big-time sack master like we projected. He is more of a pressure guy. He's kind of reminds me of a more productive version of Vic Beasley. I know that name shudders fear into every Falcons fan across the nation, but hey, I was a little bit of a fan of Vic coming out of, Clemson, and I'm sure most people were thought that he would be great. And maybe he will be in a different scenario, in a different way, in different scheme fit. But for now, we know Vic Beasley is just not the guy that we thought he would be, and that Super Bowl run was a little bit fluky for him with his sacks and all that going on. With that said, if Jadaveon Clowney were to sign with the New Orleans Saints for a fair contract that did not put the Saints in jeopardy monetarily, but the Saints are off-season cap wizards, so I'm sure they would figure something out if things got weird. But, I would accept it because let's face it, the Saints, over the last few years, one of their Achilles heels, if it's not for just bad luck, is getting injuries down on the D-line position, at the edge position, at the worst times. Cam Jordan has been a trooper, been a soldier this whole time. But you look, Davenport went down. We haven't seen Sheldon Rankins really healthy for the last couple of years. David Automata, he's been going in and out for a few times. Even going back a little years ago, like with Will Smith, and we'll see guys like that. We just couldn't keep them on the field. We had guys step up last year that were really, really great in the regular season, and they had moments in the playoffs like Shai Tuttle and things like that. But they need depth at that position because they go down really often right there. And seeing what happens when you don't have depth at certain positions, especially at the D-line and our offensive line, it really derails what Sean Payton and the Saints want to accomplish. So, getting another guy that can play a few different positions, he can kind of do outside linebacker. I don't think we would ask him to do it, but he can do definitely in the edge. Sometimes you can slide him inside depending on the scheme fit. He's definitely versatile enough to keep playing in the NFL, and I think the Saints would get him for really, really nice value if he could, or if he would accept, and he could find a lot of great success in that system.
Yeah, true. And I also think it's interesting, I feel like every player says this though. Every player wants to play for the Dallas Cowboys. I feel like every player has them on the list. Even if the Cowboys ain't even good, they're going to say the Dallas Cowboys because it's America's team. They're the big team, market, everything. And so, in regards to Dallas, I think that situation would be interesting. I feel like obviously you got Jadaveon Clowney, who you would consider, I think people would still consider him a borderline of not a star player. And, having him with the big star on his helmet, playing for Jerry Jones, he'd obviously get the attention. If he plays well in Dallas, he's going to get his money. That's just as simple as it gets. And, it would be I think it would be interesting to bring him in just to see how everything works out at the end of the day, because, Dallas's defense has obviously been in question the last few years because they haven't always played the best. And so adding him would be good. But I've already said before, with the fact that Dak has to get paid, it probably would be in the best interest for them not to pay anybody else a big deal because that's not going to make the quarterback happy. And right now that's their number one priority. So I also view that as something that's very unlikely to happen just because of just financial reasons. Because, obviously financials make a big deal here and we'll see. We'll see how it ends up. But I also have another question, Ethan. Do you think Jadaveon Clowney will be on a roster by opening day?
I think so. And it will all depend on what he's willing, if he's going to settle for something and try and make money on the back end down the road. So I think he'll probably sign a veteran contract, probably not vet men, but he'll make some $1 million. It just wouldn't be a lot comparative to what he may think his worth is. And that's just kind of where I see his deal going. Now, we have to remind ourselves that, sports teams who run salary, who's on a salary cap, so to speak, and baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but of course, they have some people have shared revenue. They have to basically design a cap within themselves in order to not overspend on certain things. We don't know where sports are going to be in the next 8 months. And I mean, as in the money might be weird. People are projecting that we won't see the NBA after whenever this bubble thing happens. After that, we may not see the NBA for a year because of the second wave prediction that seems to be more a reality than it is just a prediction. And that is something that is going to affect the revenue, how money is going to be moved around. I'm sure the NBA or the NFL is going to have similar issues. And especially since we don't know, one, how they're going to handle this whole thing. I mean, we'll talk about this later in the last segment, but as far as moving around for games, hotel spending, just keeping, COVID-19 at bay, this is going to be a lot more difficult to do that. And if you're going to allow fans to come in now, then you're just adding a whole lot of different things because it's not just the player safety you have to be wary of. It's about your customer's safety, and things can get really hairy. But your revenue is going to take a hit at some point, either later down the line or even immediately right now. So you're going to have to look at, if you're a player on the bubble and you don't have a secure deal, it's going to be something that you are probably in talks with right now. I'm sure Alvin Kamara and guys in his class that are looking to get paid next year are talking about this right now with somebody, their agent, team, personnel people, because no one could have predicted that this was going to cause people to have to take deals that they maybe not prepared to take. And, owners that don't want to give long-term deals to guys because they are not sure, when football will, be back to normal, so to speak, or when society will be back to normal enough to where they can they can put money on a guy and not potentially lose a year or more of the guy's age, health, stamina, all those things come into account. So I do think that Jadaveon's in a situation where he has to think about next year just as much as he's thinking about this current year.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I think, he's going to have to make some decisions. And hopefully he'll make decisions that are in the benefit of his career moving forward. Because there's tons of talent. This isn't about him not being good enough or not being talented enough. It's just about his production. Because, again, he's not a big sack guy. And usually you pay defensive ends big money for sacks. Not because he's elite at stopping the run or he can make that one play a game that, could change the outcome. But, we'll have to see. It really depends on just, again, how a team views Jadaveon Clowney and how they view how he can help them. If they did bring him into the team and what they would need him to do to work with everything they're trying to do on the defensive end.
Right. Give me one other team that you feel might be a sleeper for Jadaveon that may not be talked about quite enough.
Well, I mean, if you think about the landscape of the league, it just really depends on who you might think could bring him in. There's one team I don't think they're going to do it, but I think they should look into it. I think Buffalo should look into it. I think with already how good their defense is, Jadaveon Clowney coming into a situation with Sean McDermott, defensive guy, and that defense that they have in Buffalo, which was already great last year, I really think that would be a place where he could really explode and really, if he can stand out in a great defense like that, it's going to help him with his next contract. But also he's going to be in a winning situation, so obviously he'll be playing competitive games, meaningful games, and it'll be fun and interesting seeing, Jadaveon Clowney trying to track down a Cam, a Tua, a Darnold, all throughout the entire season, and put him in a position to really again make a name, I guess, again for himself as one of the better, if not one of the top defensive ends in all of the NFL.
I was gonna say maybe the Atlanta Falcons. I don't do this to pick on you, by the way. I really do think about this sort of stuff. Of course, you did lose Vic Beasley. You still have, Grady Jarrett. And, your defense is in a bit of a situation where it can go one of two ways. It can really try and improve on itself after getting healthy and stuff, or it can really take a tailspin that only the Atlanta Falcons defense could ever take. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. I can honestly say it, because if you look at it on paper, they don't have a really solid pass rush. That's why Vic Beasley had to go in the first place, because you guys tried it for a long time and it just didn't work out. It's kind of like having Josh Smith for the Atlanta Hawks. It's like it just wasn't working out, or it's kind of like having the Upton brothers or something. I don't know what it is with you guys and certain players.
You remember Jamal Anderson?
Yes.
Yeah, you saw how that worked. That was
exactly
that was a failure.
So it seems like he would fit the MO of a guy that, Dan Quinn likes on his defenses. Fast, mobile, can play a few different positions and a few different styles. I just would, if it was a minimum contract guy and, trying to make a name, maybe the Falcons would take a flyer on him. If they like him, they'll re-sign him. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. I think that'd be cool. And I would have said New England if it weren't for the Cam thing, because I think they had the money potentially to do it. And it would have been a cool little thing to see how would they use him in different packages and such. But we're going to keep on keeping on here, take another break, and come back. We're going to talk about how football can keep on keeping on for the 2020-2021 season and the foreseeable future. This is the GSMC. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, GSMC Football Podcast. We're back. Final segment. Me and Brice still here, and we have to talk about, are we the Debbie Downers or are we optimistic? I don't have a O name. We're just optimism. We're pure optimism here. So, which one are we? I guess I'm a little bit of a Debbie Downer. A little bit of a Debbie Downer, man. I am worried, and I think I'm reasonably worried. Like, I'm not sitting here thinking that this is the end, but I'm thinking that this is not going well for football in the fall, or fall sports in general, because things are just not looking like they're trending in the right direction. Have you been looking at reports recently, Brice, of just seeing what's been going on?
In the world or just in the football landscape?
Well, I mean, it kind of affects everything, but yeah, more like everything, really. We can talk about the world stuff real quick. Like, Florida is in a bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's
and
bad.
I know they've started putting back some restrictions. I don't know if it was Texas or California started closing down bars again and clubs. There's, some states are starting to try to put some stuff back in place and everything. And, obviously, Florida is just terrible right now. So it's affecting a lot.
Right.
It's definitely affecting a lot.
Even where we live, we broke the case record number for the second straight day in a row. So it's kind of like, when you see like a summer and it's really hot and you'll see, we just broke the record for hottest day of the summer since 1972 or something like that. And it always seems like we break the record every year. Well, it's kind of like this, but on a more rapid scale, and it's not about heat anymore. It's about, disease. So we're hearing stuff like Texas and Louisiana are closing their borders. Things aren't trending up like we would hope for things to trend up for sports to really have a chance in the fall. And I'm really concerned. Like, to be honest, I don't want to sound like a pessimistic guy who doesn't think that sports is going to come back. And that's just the angle that I'm taking, because I want sports to come back. My job is sports. Like, this is what we do. Like, we talk about football. We talk about fantasy football. We do sports. You do basketball. Like, I can't imagine if the bubble were to just be like, yeah, you come on the podcast and be like, yeah, actually, I think the bubble's going to fail, and that's my angle. Like, no one wants the bubble to fail if you like sports. Mm-hmm. It's just not looking good right now. Like, I can't imagine. Like, Morehouse just closed off their season for not only football, but for cross country. And this is not Power 5. This is not Group of 5. This is a small conference of HBCUs. So this isn't like the top class of the football world, but it's still something to be wary of, because football still drives a lot of revenue. It still does a lot of things. And when you're canceling full seasons off right now, I'd have to imagine that we'll see the writing on the wall, because we got to remember, I think it was Mississippi State or one Division I school in the South decided that they were going to go ahead with bringing kids back for the fall semester for classes. And they said that they would reportedly end in Thanksgiving break. Like, they would stop all classes. You don't return back. You just go home and finish your finals at home. And everybody else around the country essentially has followed suit with that ideology and with that plan in place. But we don't know how that affects college football, because there is no bubble. Like, you can't bubble people. who go to school. Right? You can't do it. No matter what, because you can't bubble people. Like in the NBA, yeah, there's a bubble, but people can still leave. Like there's rules where you can still leave the bubble if you choose to. But when you come back, they're going to test you up and down and probably even still might precautionarily quarantine you for a little while. Like we're not in a situation where people can be completely isolated, and college is just a toss up. We went to school together. We know how college people get down. It's not happening, man. Like it's not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why honestly, right now there's a big microscope on the NBA and just in sports in general, since we're talking everything, because of the fact that they have this bubble thing they're about to do. And obviously the success of the bubble will give confidence for them going into the next season that they're trying to start in December. In football situation, obviously, they're just like, we can't bubble, but what we can do is restrict and try to isolate and contain as quickly as possible. Like I said, it seems like it's going to be very difficult, but at the same time, I understand money's on the line. A lot of things are on the line, and they feel like we have to try and just see what happens. I'm sure there was a massive spread within the league, then they would probably stop the season. Because literally, you know how it is with this type of stuff. There has to literally be, just because the outside world is on fire, if the inside of the league ain't on fire, we're good. So it's going to be something that I think we'll have to see. And honestly, I honestly thought about this. I wouldn't be surprised if players in the NFL or in college say, you know what, it's getting rough out here. I'm not going to play, coach. I'm going to stay home at college because I'm going to either go to class and that's it. I'm not doing anything else. I'm going to go home. NFL, listen, I'm going to stay home with my family. If y'all don't want to pay me, so be it. And that's something that could eventually pop up in the future if, things continue to get bad and everything. So, the NFL has, like I said, some decisions that have to be made because they're taking it on we'll have to see and adjust basis. That's what they're doing. They're not going to make any rash judgments ahead of time because they feel like with the coronavirus and how everything is going, you can't just say it won't work. You have to try it and then actually see it won't work before you say it won't work, because what if it could work? And that could is what makes them do it. Especially since you're seeing Major League Baseball is about to resume their season. Obviously, soccer is about to resume their season. All the major sports leagues are currently basically saying we're gonna try this. We're gonna see what happens.
They kind of have no choice but to try. But I guess the thing that people aren't really looking too deep is everybody's still in the mindset if somebody gets COVID, they'll quarantine for 14 days and they'll be fine. But we're seeing more and more about videos and people in the health profession telling you that, just because you get it and you self-quarantine, it doesn't mean that you won't get, actual bad side effects from getting COVID-19 and being a survivor of it. Like, if it's bad, you can really be damaged for a long time, immune system-wise or anything. And for an athlete, just the smallest change in how you breathe can really drastically affect you. There's a report that I think Ezekiel Elliott talking about his trainer or his health professional has told him that he is not allowed to work out right now, and not even by himself, because, you could really hurt your immune system, hurt your respiratory system trying to do stuff that your body just can't do right now due to the COVID-19 effects. And that's scary to think. So if players can get it during mid-season and it affects them that bad, could you imagine? I would have to assume there needs to be a clause in people's contracts and stuff about health insurance, things like that about this. Insurance is going to go through the roof because all it takes is one guy that has a really, really bad case of it and is hospitalized and their breathing is bad. Even in the NBA, all it takes is one guy, like Kawhi or somebody who matters. Not to say that no one matters, any person doesn't matter. But I mean, as in somebody who has the pull to make this whole thing just shut down. Like, the season is done. Like, I don't want to wish it on LeBron, but like, he's the main guy. Like, if LeBron goes down with COVID-19, and you know he's not a spring chicken, right? He's not 21, and you see people younger than in their early teens or like early 20s that at one point thought that, you know, they could be asymptomatic or carry it, but they really don't have, like, their immune system is strong enough to fight it. And now we're seeing more and more that, you know, young people are having some really bad effects with COVID-19 themselves. It's gonna get bad, right? So LeBron, 34, I don't care how physically strong he is. I don't care how well he takes care of his body. If something that attacks your immune system and your respiratory system and makes it hard for you to breathe and fills your lungs with fluids, attacks somebody, you never know how you are going to recover from that. Like, people are having lung transplants and stuff like this. This stuff is no game, and we're in a country where, you know, we aren't taking it as serious as we should. And unfortunately, that is going to affect the things that we love the most. So, not to mention, it's one thing if the rest of the country is basically saying, you know what, we're going to self-quarantine and we're going to stick to it for the next 6 months. Like, we don't care. We're going to shut things down that we don't need. We'll keep doing the, you know, hands-free delivery stuff. You know, we won't be eating in restaurants. We won't be doing this, that, or the third, and we'll keep it pushing. But if all the other sports leagues are like, okay, we can still travel to hotels because there's nobody in them. We can still go to this such and such. We can order out to eat on these days, or we can hire a team chef to cook meals for the team. You know, to me, that feels safer than, you know, basically everybody's out in the open, kind of, in a sense. Like, there's no second line protection for the football games. Like, especially if they're looking to bring in fans at some point. I am really, really nervous about this stuff.
Yeah, there's just so much uncertainty that's going around right now, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing and the biggest cause of concern for the rest of this year and maybe the beginning of 2021. You know, until the vaccine comes out, we're all going to be trying to figure out what's the best way to combat it. Obviously, you have people who feel like we should be shutting down again. You still have some people who are just like, listen, we can't run from it forever. So it just depends on, I guess, what side you're on, and it depends on what you think is best. I think obviously businesses are going to try to do anything they can to survive. And it's just, and we have to think about this too. Even once this passes by, the damage will be done. We will still have to deal with the repercussions of, or the, I guess maybe you can use the word chaos, destruction of COVID-19 on this country after it's done. And we may not recover from that for another year or two. So, because, you know, it's not like you could just go back to normal as soon as it's over. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some thinking. It's going to take some reconstruction. It's going to take some change. And it's going to take a lot for us to really get back to where we were before based off everything that has happened, because, you know, we've seen what it's done here in Georgia, and we hear about what it's doing in other states, and we see how people are responding to it all over social media. And so this is a pretty deep situation that is sad to say just does not have resolution coming anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's getting tougher. I just hope that if you're listening to us, thank you, first of all. Second, please wear your mask because it helps everyone else around you. And a little discomfort for the safety of others should not be a political statement. It should be something that you should do for the right of humanity. All right, but that is the GSMC football podcast for this week. I'd like to thank you all for listening. Don't forget to rate and review us on the platform you do choose. Listen to us. 5 stars, please. And don't forget to follow us on our social media, Facebook and Twitter. That is GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you all for listening once again. And for Brice, this is Ethan, and we'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.